How you doing today, guys? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, I quickly want to revisit the Mark Sanchez story. Perry Toll is a victim here, but it's crazy how a celebrity being a celebrity can transform attacker into a victim. Right now, as you watch the news and you really do see the coverage, you'll see that there's sways. You'll see that there's stories that are coming out that just quietly poke at the victim. I mean, there was one article by TMZ that talked about a policy violation because Perry Toll carried a pocket knife, and they made it look like the policy violation was a violation of the law, and it's not. It's a policy violation that should be revisited by the company. Guys doing deliveries at 12:30 at night in the middle of a city. They should have a way to protect themselves, but let's not forget the knife that he carried was not illegal. He was allowed to carry that knife. And the OC, or the pepper spray, allowed to carry that too. He's able to protect himself. But there's a whole article by TMC that made it look like this violation of a strict policy was equivalent to him violating the law. And now you got to worry about this gentleman here, Perry Toll's got to worry about not just recovering, but what's going to happen when he looks to go back to work. Will he still have a job? You know, then when you watch the news, you could see sometimes when they ask these questions, the questions are geared towards Sanchez. I mean, I watched the interview where one of the reporters was talking to the prosecutor, Ryan Meir, who's doing a great job, by the way. But they just started questioning, I know you got all this evidence that showcases, but did you talk to Mark? What did Mark have to say? Well, I got all this evidence. I got cameras from the hotels, both Westin and Sheraton. I got cameras inside the vehicle. And everything the victim said matched with what happened in the video. And then also, on another note, well, you know what? Well, he was drunk, so he wasn't himself. So does he really have control of his actions? Doesn't matter, because he chose to drink. Well, maybe he was drugged. God, guys. At the end of the day, we got a victim who got his freaking face cut. And then you get one lawyer on one of the channels saying, well, why are we not looking at Perry Toll as the victim? He obviously brought a knife to a fist fight. This wasn't a fist fight. It was an attack. This wasn't an altercation. It was an attack. The verbiage matters. Going so far as getting something from Donald Trump saying Mark Sanchez is a nice guy. And even when the family, who's very experienced at writing, with the media, the family of Mark Sanchez, kind of more worried about Mark Sanchez, his recovery. And now he was stabbed. What's funny, I get a knife is a weapon when you're using it to attack. But when you're trying to survive and you deployed OC or you deployed pepper spray, and then next you're using it as a knife, it's not a weapon anymore. It's a tool. It's a tool for your survival. I want to read something to you that I put together today that I think matters, because again, I think the importance of this channel is really speaking for the victims, because sometimes they're quick to create a narrative, sports icon, whatever was stabbed, and then now the narrative starts to fall that way when eventually that's not the case. And what they do is they try to keep things consistent with that official narrative and saying, instead of outright saying, hey, we were wrong. And there's a reason why he was arrested at the hospital after he was recovering from his stab wounds. Sometimes I know people are like, oh, there's such a race to get the story out there just to get the views. No, it's also to create the narrative. They're in a race to get the story out there so they can create the narrative. I mean, look at the David story, how that narrative is now switching. The Celeste Rivas Hernandez case. But I want to mention something. By the way, in the latest update here for Mark Sanchez, and this is Mark Sanchez, is earlier Tuesday, Sanchez entered a not guilty plea to the charges, and he did waive his initial hearing. And now we're expecting a pretrial conference next month. But listen to this, guys, and tell me what your thoughts on this is, because I want to do a little bit of a deeper dive into celebrity and self-defense in the court of public opinion. So this case offers a fascinating lens through which to examine how justice, media narratives, and public perception collide in modern America. Let me expand on several critical dimensions. The asymmetry of narrative power. What's particularly striking here is the massive imbalance in narrative shaping resources between the two parties, Mark Sanchez, right? So he arrives with instant name recognition and public goodwill built over years as an NFL quarterback. A communication-savvy family capable of releasing carefully crafted statements. Implicit support from powerful figures. President calling him a nice guy. A media apparatus trained to cover celebrity stories sympathetically, which I saw. And financial resources for top-tier legal representation. What about Perry Toll, by contrast? What about Perry Toll? A 69-year-old delivery driver, the epitome of invisibility in American society. Someone whose injuries are so severe he can barely speak to tell his own story, dependent on his attorney to communicate for him, and missing his son's wedding due to disfigurement. And then he's facing potential job consequences for a policy violation while defending his life. Maybe we should write to the company. Check out that TMZ article. See what that company is. Let's write to the company and say, hey, we're really worried about a policy violation right now. The knife was legal. What are we doing? The guy had to protect himself. This disparity matters enormously. The first story many people hear become the truth. If your initial exposure is beloved sports figure stabbed by delivery driver, stabbed, not Mark Sanchez attacked delivery driver. It's reversed. The framing is sticky. Even when fuller facts emerge showing Sanchez allegedly climbed into someone's truck and attacked them, and that's the paradox, right? The legal analysis here reveals uncomfortable truths about how we evaluate violence. Age and physicality matter in self-defense claims. A 69-year-old man facing a younger, stronger assailant who has already ignored all social boundaries that's entering someone's vehicle is an extraordinary violation. Faces a different threat calculus that most people than most people would appreciate. Toll didn't have the luxury of fighting fair. Pepper spray failed. He was pinned in a confined space, and his attacker was apparently intoxicated and enraged over a parking space, which the rumor for this parking space is unique. I'm hearing a rumor that Sanchez wanted the truck moved because it was blocking his ability or his ability to do sprint runs or wind sprints. Again, that hasn't been confirmed, but that's the rumor mill. And then, that basically he wanted the truck moved so he could continue doing whatever wind sprints he was doing. Yet that's, hey, the manager wants you to move. No, you want me to move, and I'm trying to do a job, and you're doing wind sprints. So if that's the case, that's unique, because then he went and told the driver, hey, you got to move because the manager doesn't want you. That's a lie. Did anybody ask the manager if he said that? Again, the rumor mill is that he was doing wind sprints and the truck could have gotten his way, but that's the rumor mill. So, but yet there's a perverse dynamic where victims who defend themselves effectively face scrutiny for overreacting. If Toll had been merely beaten unconscious, Sanchez might face lesser charges, and Toll would have less leverage because Toll managed to stop the attack through desperate last resort use of a knife. He's now being questioned. Was that really necessary? And this creates a cruel incentive structure. Victims are expected to calibrate their defensive force perfectly in the midst of mortal terror. The no weapon policy details particularly insidious in media coverage. It's legally irrelevant. An employer rule doesn't override the right to self-preservation, but it serves to subtly criminalize Toll in the public mind. Well, he wasn't supposed to have that knife anyway. It's a perfect example of how tangential facts can poison perception. Would we rather Toll have been defenseless and possibly killed? The policy exists to prevent workplace violence, not to ensure workers are vulnerable to random attacks. The intoxication double standard, right, and the drug defense strategy, that's something they're trying to pull now, right? When you look at what some of the news is saying, they're saying, well, maybe Mark Sanchez wasn't in control of his total behavior. Maybe. He was intoxicated, but Ryan Meir, the prosecutor, said, yeah, but you still choose to get drunk, so he got that. And then the next avenue is, well, maybe he was drugged. Maybe he took the drugs involuntarily. And the prosecutor is quick to say, yeah, could have, but we haven't heard anything like that. Here's where the case became truly disturbing. Voluntary intoxication is not a legal defense, yet it functions as a social defense for celebrities. When Trump says Sanchez got caught up in something crazy, he didn't understand. There's an implicit suggestion that alcohol made him not fully responsible, a grace we rarely extend to ordinary defendants. And he said he got caught up in something crazy, but he did not say that the person caused the craziness. There's a difference. The wording matters. Even when they throw out altercation, it's not 50-50, it's an attack. Let me move first. Where am I? When Sanchez got caught up in something crazy, he didn't understand there's an implicit suggestion that alcohol made him not fully responsible, a grace we rarely extend to ordinary defendants. Meanwhile, the civil lawsuit alleges, because Toll is suing Fox and Sanchez, Sanchez had a known history of alcohol issues, that Fox should have addressed it. If true, this wasn't a one-off tragedy, it's a pattern, yet the family statement frames it as a senseless incident that happened to Mark, not because of Mark's choices. And guys, you got to look at the article from TMZ where the family wrote a response back. Compare this to how we treat other intoxicated defendants. A drunk driver who kills someone gets no sympathy for not understanding what was happening, but celebrity plus alcohol plus violence somehow produces he's going through something. He must be going through something. That's why he's drunk. And then you have the narrative that maybe he was drugged, perhaps anticipating that voluntary intoxication won't generate sufficient sympathy, or recognizing that surveillance footage contradicts any claim of victimhood. There are emerging suggestions that Sanchez may have been drugged without his knowledge. This defense strategy, if pursued, would represent a fascinating evolution in celebrity accountability avoidance. The logic of the drug defense is transparent. If Sanchez was intoxicated by choice, he's culpable. If someone drugged him, he becomes a victim twice over. Once by the phantom drugging, again by Toll's knife. It transforms the narrative from drunk celebrity attack workers. Transforms the narrative from drunk celebrity attacks worker to poisoned celebrity acts erratically, then brutally stabbed. But this defense faces enormous evidentiary hurdles. Number one, toxicology would need to show specific substances consistent with involuntary drugging, like a roofie, a GHB, etc., not just alcohol or recreational drugs he could have been taken willingly. The timeline matters. Was Sanchez at a location where drugging was plausible? Who had access? When did symptoms start? The surveillance video reportedly shows him approaching Toll's truck and initiating the confrontation, behavior that suggests intentionality, not confusion, and motive and opportunity. Who would drug Sanchez and why? Without a credible suspect or scenario, this becomes unfalsifiable conspiracy thinking. Unfalsifiable conspiracy thinking. Think about that. The legal standard remains unchanged. Even if Sanchez was drugged, Indiana law doesn't give someone carte blanche to assault others. If you are too impaired to control yourself, you shouldn't be approaching strangers and climbing into their vehicles. The question becomes, did Sanchez knowingly put himself in the position to become impaired? And why this defense strategy reveals desperation? The drug claim, if it emerges, should be understood as a Hail Mary when the evidence is damning. It's the legal equivalent of the dog ate my homework. Unfalsifiable, conveniently exculpatory, and designed to generate reasonable doubt where none should exist. What makes this particularly cynical is the timing. Such claims typically surface after surveillance video proves the defendant was the aggressor, witness statements contradict the innocent victim narrative, and toxicology reports come back showing intoxication. Public opinion starts turning against the celebrity. In other words, when you can't dispute what happened, dispute your mental state. When you can't claim self-defense, claim you weren't yourself. It's a predictable playbook for wealthy defendants with sophisticated legal teams. The deeper problem, this defense insults everyone's intelligence while exploiting legitimate concerns. Yes, people do get drugged. Yes, it's a serious crime, but weaponizing that real phenomenon to excuse attacking a 69-year-old man in the workplace, that's not seeking justice. It's seeking escape. So what this means for Toll? Well, for Perry Toll, a drug defense adds insult to disfigurement. Not only did he have to fight for his life, not only does he carry permanent scars, now he may face a narrative where his attacker was a victim of mysterious drugging rather than a man who made bad choices. This is gaslighting on a societal scale. Toll's lived reality being attacked, fighting back, nearly dying, living with consequences, getting reframed as him being the aggressor against someone who wasn't himself. The surveillance video shows what happened. Medical evidence shows who got hurt worse, but a skilled defense attorney can make a jury feel that maybe, possibly, there's some shadow explanation that absolves Sanchez. It's particularly galling because it requires ignoring, I did Occam's razor. What's more likely, that Sanchez got drunk, high voluntarily, and attacked someone over parking, or that unknown parties drugged him for an unknown reason, causing him to specifically attack this particular delivery driver at that particular moment? The civil lawsuit as truth-telling is key. Toll's decision to sue Fox News alongside Sanchez is strategically brilliant and morally significant. It forces uncomfortable questions. Did Fox know about Sanchez's drinking and put him in positions where incidents were foreseeable? What responsibility do employers have when they profit from celebrity personas but ignore warning signs? And should Fox have provided support, monitoring, or intervention? The negligent hiring supervision claim transforms this from random parking lot fight into preventable tragedy enabled by institutional indifference. It suggests Sanchez wasn't just having a bad day. There were red flags that were ignored because he was a valuable talent. This also explains why Fox has gone silent. In the criminal case, they can distance themselves. That's Mark's personal matter. So they can distance themselves when it's criminal. But when it's civil, their own policies, communications, and decision-making are on trial. Discovery could be devastating. Internal emails, HR complaints, previous incidents, all potentially admissible. The drug defense, if attempted, could actually strengthen Toll's civil case against Fox. If Sanchez's team argues he was so impaired he couldn't control himself, that raises questions. Where was Fox's duty of care? If he had substance issues serious enough to make him vulnerable to drugging or to voluntary intoxication that mimics it, why was he working without support systems? And then you got the permanent disfigurement, right, versus injuries. The language around harm matters enormously here. Sanchez's family speaks of his serious injuries requiring ongoing medical care, but the nature of those injuries, stab wounds, will heal, stitches, recovery, perhaps some scarring. Toll's injuries are described as a gash penetrating all the way through his left cheek, affecting his jaw, tongue, and mouth, making speech difficult, causing severe permanent disfigurement, destroying his appearance for his son's wedding, creating loss of function. These are life-altering. Toll will see this attack every time he looks in a mirror, every time he tries to eat, every time someone stares at his face. His professional life may be compromised. Customers facing work become hard with facial disfigurements. His social life, his self-image, his daily functioning, all permanently altered. Yet somehow, the media coverage often treats both men's injuries as roughly equivalent. Both were hurt. This is a failure of moral imagination. And if Sanchez's defense introduces a drug narrative, watch how this disparity gets weaponized. Sanchez's stab wounds become evidence of his victimization, while Toll's disfigurement becomes unfortunate collateral damage from a confused person who didn't know what he was doing. The man who defended himself becomes the one who went too far against someone not in control. And here's some good structural questions. Who gets to be a victim? Ultimately, the case asks, what does it take for society to recognize someone as a real victim? In America, the answer seems to be fame helps. Sanchez gets instant sympathy. As soon as that article went out, that first article from TMZ or whoever it was, sports celebrity stabbed, he got instant sympathy. Class matters. Delivery drivers are invisible until they're a problem. And photogenic suffering matters. Sanchez drenched in blood versus Toll's scarred face. And again, the narrative flexibility helps. Sanchez can be drunk, drugged, or confused. Toll just has the facts. Toll had to be mutilated, had to have incontrovertible proof of harm to even get a hearing. And even then, people question whether his defense was justified. If the surveillance video didn't exist, would anyone believe him? The potential drugged defense underscores this asymmetry perfectly. Sanchez's team can float theories, create doubts, suggest alternative explanations. Toll just has his scars and the truth. One side has infinite narrative possibilities. The other has only what happened. So what should we take from this? As this case proceeds, several principles should guide our thinking. Celebrity is not character. Being good at football or television doesn't make someone a good person or an innocent party. Initial narratives are often wrong. The first story, beloved figure attacked, flipped once facts emerged. Beloved figure was the attacker. Remember, sometimes the media is out to put the facts out, not because they want to be the first to cover the story. They want to be the first to create the narrative. Remember that. They create the narrative, and if there's any adjustments, it's obstacles to get to where the truth really is. Defensive wounds on an aggressor don't make them a victim. Sanchez injuries came from Toll's legitimate self-defense. Toll using a knife was not a weapon. It was a tool for his survival. Corporate responsibility matters. Corporate responsibility matters. Fox role, if negligent, should have consequences. And justice requires uncomfortable questions. Why was Sanchez intoxicated and enraged over parking? What does this say about entitlement and impulse control? And then you have the exotic defense deserves skepticism. If a drug narrative emerges despite lacking evidence, recognize it for what it is, a last-ditch effort to escape accountability when the facts are damning. Like in football, it's that Hail Mary. And the Occam's razor applies to justice. The simplest explanation: intoxicated celebrity attacks worker over trivial dispute. Worker defends himself is almost certainly correct unless extraordinary evidence proves otherwise. Extraordinary evidence. The most revealing question to ask out of all, this is the question I want you to ask yourself: if Perry Toll were the one with the history of alcohol issues who drunkenly climbed into a Fox News personality's truck and attacked him, then got stabbed in self-defense, would anyone be sympathetic to Toll? Would anyone entertain the idea he'd been drugged? Or would he simply be violent, drunk, gets what he deserves? That's asymmetry. That's double standard. It's the entire case in a microcosm. And if Sanchez's defense tries to float a drug theory without solid evidence, that desperation itself tells us everything we need to know about the strength of his case. There it is. Love to get your thoughts on this. And as always, guys, stay safe.